Hi, friends. This is Joanne Snap, and I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about your pathway to medical school. So, when I talk about getting into med school, I'm actually thinking about a lot of different ways that you can do that. I know that most people going into college are thinking MD, allopathic, that's the only way to go. As you go through college, a lot of people learn about osteopathic, and that becomes a really popular route to apply MD and DO, although I'm finding that more and more students choose to apply to DO only. But a couple of other options that hardly anybody ever thinks about are also podiatric medicine and naturopathic medicine. Both are licensed physicians able to, DPMs are able to perform surgery, both are able to prescribe medication, and NDs are primary care physicians that can specialize in a lot of areas. And so I just want to say, mention those two things in case anyone was interested in exploring those options. They're a lot more accessible than MD and DO, and some people are more naturally drawn towards subspecialties like sports medicine or naturopathic medicine. So if you're interested in talking about any of those, please let me know, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you. And so tonight I want to talk a little bit about what is the secret to getting in. And if you know me, you'll know that this is a funny question because there is not really a formula or a secret to getting in, although a lot of people look for one, pay for one, hope that there is one. I'm going to tell you some strategies that I'm aware of and just give you some general logistical tips that might help you be successful. But I want to make it clear that there's no way in any way, shape, or form that anyone can guarantee or predict your success in this process. No matter how hard you try, no matter how great you are, sometimes it happens that really amazing people fall through the cracks in this process. Although some of the ways that I advise students help prevent that falling through the cracks, it is still possible, and it's very difficult to control or predict how this process is going to go for anybody. So I really, really believe that the number one thing that any medical school is looking for when they're screening applications is the answer to this question. I know there is a lot of emphasis on answering the question, why medicine? And that's an important question because that's really, sort of what drives your application. However, everybody applies to med school because they really want to be physicians. It's kind of hard to get through this process if you don't have that desire. I mean, nobody takes OChem or takes a 7.5 hour science test or pays $3,000 unless they really want to be a doctor. So I've never found that admissions people doubt that you want to be a doctor. So answering why medicine is, it's interesting, it's kind of cool, but it doesn't really give them the answer to the question that they're really trying to figure out, which is, why should we pick you? How are you going to contribute to our school? What value do you add to our school and the larger community of medicine? And are you a good fit for us? And fit is a bit subjective and controversial because it's hard to measure fit and it's hard to objectify fit. But if you trust the process and you trust that medical schools really are trying to create a diverse class comprised of people from all backgrounds with different lived experiences and different academic backgrounds from different geographic regions, if you really trust the process, which I would encourage you to do so, then being honest about who you are and the value that you bring to medicine is honestly the best route to go because it gives them what they're looking for. It gives them the answer to their question. Why should we pick you? What can you add to our school? Just telling them how you arrived at the decision to pursue medicine doesn't exactly tell them what they need in order to pick you. It doesn't cut to the chase. And I use this chart a lot. It's a chart that I kind of stole from the AAMC when I left the medical school world. This is the chart that the AAMC used to train me when I was trained for the AAMC holistic review process. And it's the chart that we used for our admissions committee when I trained our admissions committee on how to use a holistic review process. And essentially, it's the EAM model, the experiences, attributes, and metrics. This is what makes up the holistic pie chart. However, this chart breaks it down a little bit more specifically. So when we look at the center of the ring, of course, MCAT, GPA, upward trends, those are always going to be at the center of everything. I mean, you can have amazing experiences, you could be an amazing person, but if your MCAT and GPA isn't anywhere near where it needs to be, which is, I would argue, a 501 and a 3.0, 3.1, then it's going to be really hard to catch people's attention with all the other things. So we want to focus on the metrics first, make sure that you've demonstrated the ability to handle medical school by creating that upward trend. And then we move to the middle ring. And this middle ring is honestly the most important ring. You can look at some of the characteristics, the attributes, and some people are surprised. I often hear things like, why would they care about my sexual orientation? Or why does my faith matter to them? Or how do they measure my maturity? And how do these things, how do they play into how they pick people? Well, if you think about representation and why having representation from various groups is important in closing health disparities and creating more health equity, you'll understand why having a broad representation in terms of sexual orientation or gender identity or religions or national origins, how all of that is so important when it comes to creating a diverse class. And so I think people often think of attributes as things like empathy and leadership skills, which leadership is on there, it's important. But you're not going to see things like passion and empathy and communication. Those aren't necessarily the attributes that kind of stand out to them. And it's not that they're not important, but I would argue that having empathy and communication skills are actually a bare minimum prereq for being considered in this process. You're not going to stand out because you speak to people well or because you are able to connect with humans. That's an actual requirement, not something that adds value to the process. And so, one way to consider this is when you're thinking about the extra value that you add, ask yourself for any given thing, can 90% of the applicants say the same thing, or will 90% of the applicants say the same thing? And it's not one particular attribute or characteristic or competency that will get you in, but rather a combination of your lived experiences, the things you've seen from your past, the things you've done in college, things you hope to do in your future, the things about you that are that are permanent, static. You can't change the your sexual orientation, your race, your age. Those are things that are very valuable to them, and they make up who you are. And there's nothing at all to be ashamed or to hide or to not discuss about those things. We should be open about the value that being an older applicant brings, or the value of being an underrepresented minority in medicine brings to healthcare. Talking about that out loud, using words, those are very, very important things to do during the application process. And honestly, it's one of the funniest things when I'm talking to people and I point out the value that people bring. They often say, "Oh, I didn't know I can talk about that." And I always laugh because I'm like, "Of course you can talk about that. That's exactly what you should be talking about." And so when we go to the outer ring, your experiences, this is where some of those lived experiences come in and reinforce your attributes. So, you'll see things at the top left, life experiences. Don't discount the non-clinical things that you've done in your life or seen or things that have happened to you that shaped who you are and gave you a unique perspective. I think everyone's looking for these sort of profound clinical experiences where you got to suture or see brain surgery or something like that. That has nothing to do with what kind of physician you're going to be. That just means you got lucky enough to be somewhere and someone let you watch something. But that didn't shape you into who you are as a person in the sense of what you can bring to others. And so we want to think about those life experiences that really changed our perspective, that influenced us in some way, in a way that, and translate that into, this is now how I intend to treat others, or this is how I will consider this situation, or how I hope to contribute in this way in the future. We can't forget the 15 core competencies. The AAMC got together with the med schools a few years ago and asked the med schools, what is it that you're looking for? They all agreed on these 15 competencies. So when we talk about the secret to getting in, or what are they looking for, it is not a mystery. They have actually told us exactly what they're looking for. And so I always encourage my advisees to print this out and put it on the wall and think about this and look at this as you're writing the application, because it is what should guide everything in your application. When you're featuring different competencies in your experience writing, you want to think about, how does this story I'm about to tell in my meaningful illustrate my resilience or my adaptability or my capacity for improvement? You want to think about what they're looking for and give them what they're looking for, rather than trying to imagine some random qualities about yourself that you think are good, Just show them that you have what it is that they're already measuring in you. So how do we show them all of these things about you? I mentioned your experiences, and I think a lot of people think about experiences almost like a checklist. Well, there are a certain number of things I have to do, like I have to have a certain number of hours of shadowing, and I have to have a certain number of hours of clinical. I get some of the most interesting questions when it comes to hours, like, well, I'm really below average in hours. And I'm always very perplexed by what that means. I didn't realize there was an average number of hours for anything. Most med schools don't require a certain number of hours. My understanding has always been you do as much as you need to in order to gain the experience that you need to get what you need out of the experience. So you don't have to do anything for any amount of time. The med schools don't actually care how long you do anything. It's more about whatever makes the most sense for your life. So if you had a job for a year and a half, it is what it is. You had that job, right? People leave jobs all the time. If you hated the job, then you leave the job and you get a different job. Don't overthink that too much. If you had a job for 2 months and you hate the job, then quit. Go get a different job that's more meaningful to you. I don't think that they're thinking about it at the same level that you're probably thinking about it. Now, if you've never held a job for more than 2 months, that might be a problem. But hopefully, you're doing things in your experiences that matter to you, that are meaningful, and that are allowing you to show the skills that you hope to bring to medicine one day. And so the things you choose to do with your time are tools and that they show the schools who you are as a person. So if you want to work with children in your future, hopefully you're choosing to do activities that involve children. Or if you want to work in women's health, you're doing things in that area, or you want to go into emergency medicine. Hopefully you're thinking about becoming an EMT or volunteering in the ER or, doing anything that relates back to that. Here are some common pre-health experiences that I've seen a lot of people do. And it's not that one of these is better than another. All of these can get you into med school. It's really just about what makes sense for your life at whatever point. What is it that you enjoy doing most? And how do these again show the skills that you want to bring? And when you're writing about your experiences, for a COMAS, you get 600 characters, and for AMCAS, you only get 700 characters. That's really an itty bitty paragraph to talk about what did you do in that experience. I really wouldn't waste characters, going through the nitty gritty details of the job description. Think big picture. So, what is it that you took away from that experience? Maybe focus in on one major job or task that you did that taught you something. And you want to zoom out and look at all of your experiences together. So, there are a lot of things that you do well. And so, you want to make sure each of those things that you do well are highlighted throughout all of your experiences. I don't mean mention the same thing multiple times, but make sure that all of your different skills are mentioned in different experiences. And so that's where having someone help you kind of read through them and make sure that you're talking about different things in each one is really important, because you want to make sure, maybe this could help you as you're drafting. Next to each experience description, actually read it and write next to it the competency that you're hoping it exemplifies. If you can't figure out what it's showing about you, then go back and look at your writing again and think about how you can write that paragraph to highlight some quality that you have. And in your 3 meaningful for AMCAS, you want to focus on the question, how did this change you? So you're going to tell a story that leads down to the end that highlights the one significant change that occurred within you from that experience. So you have 3 of those. So each one should highlight a different change about you. And that change should be some value that you bring to medicine. If you're going to write a disadvantage statement, then you should focus in on any of the 3, any combination. You can do more than one: economic, environmental, or educational. This is not a story. This is just stating what happened. And this gives you the liberty of taking it out of your personal statement. So if you put any of this information here, which I would encourage you to, if you do believe you're disadvantaged, even if you don't feel disadvantaged, it is beneficial for you to write a disadvantage statement if this applies to you, because you want people to have context. You want them to understand where it is you're coming from. And you don't want to have to tell all of this information in your personal statement. Your personal statement really should be highlighting, the great things about you, not that, things that have happened in our past are bad or things we should hide, but you really are focusing in on the skills and the value that you bring to medicine. And the things from our past don't always necessarily have a lot to do with us as people. So get this out of the way, put it in your disadvantage statement, and then in your personal statement, you can just focus in on what have you done and what is it that you hope to do in your future. So your personal statement, traditionally, people have always answered why medicine. And I've always, for the last several years, pushed my applicants to focus on the question, what is the value that you bring to medicine? True story, when I worked at a med school for 4 years, I sat in on every single admissions committee meeting for 4 years. When I left the med school and I went to an undergrad university to become the director of health professions advising, I honestly didn't even know what the writing prompt was for the personal statement. It really wasn't anything that we discussed. It wasn't, answering why medicine wasn't important to us. We really were just looking at the person and looking at their story and looking at what they brought to us. And each person was picked for their own reason. Had very little to do with why they wanted to be a doctor. It was just more, what else did they have about them that was interesting? Some people got picked because they were philosophy majors. Some people got picked because they were tattoo artists in their former life. Some people got picked because they were older. It didn't, everybody had their own reason why they were picked, but it wasn't because of their reason for becoming a doctor. I can't remember anyone ever standing out for that reason. And so that's why, that lived experience of my own is why I've always pushed people to shy away from just telling a journey story that led them into medicine, because I know in our process, it wouldn't have helped us get to the point, which is, why should we pick you? So our personal statement it shows us who you are, and it tells stories that tie back to medicine. And it's not a place where you're going to talk about your bad grades. We're not going to talk about the things, all the terrible things that happened to you in your past. We're not going to make huge political statements here. We're really focusing in on you. We don't want to talk about other people too long. There's lots and lots of things you don't want to do, but it's okay to talk about religion. It's okay to talk about mental health. It's okay to talk about eating disorders, or it's even okay to say a bad experience you had in medicine, but we're not going on a tirade about why you're going to change medicine or why you're going to fix all these problems in society. You're probably not going to do that. But it's okay to mention things that you'd like to contribute to. So instead of saying, I want to end suffering for people, I want to end suffering so that no one has to live through what my grandfather lived through, you could say, I hope, as a physician, I hope to take the time to spend with my patients and their families at their end of life, so that they can feel comfortable enough to ask me questions and I can make their transition to the next life, comfortable. Something that's really specific about what it is that you hope to do, rather than commenting on, all of medicine and making this big grandiose comment. Just focus in on what you want to do with your patients and what that looks like, so that they have an idea of what matters to you, and sort of who you are, and sort of, just how you see yourself practicing. Not that we want to spend too much time on this, because you all should be way past this at this point. But for our prereqs, you always want to cross-check the school's websites before you apply, and just make sure you meet the requirements for all of the schools' sites, especially things like physio is popping up more often now in some schools, biochemistry. It's not common that psych and social and genetics show up. Those are things I have always recommended people take before taking the MCAT, just to have a little bit more of a foundation in the sciences and social sciences before taking that test. Can you take these classes pass, no pass? Well, pre-COVID, I would have always said no, but with COVID now, I think a lot of people do have some of these as pass, no pass. And so it's not the end of the world, but I hope you don't have any of these pass, no pass after summer of 2020. Prior to summer of 2020, spring of 2020, or summer 2020, it would have been fine. After that, I don't think that a lot of schools are going to be as sympathetic any longer. So don't take these pass, no pass if you have the choice. And it's perfectly fine to take these in the summertime. You can take them studying abroad. It doesn't matter. You can take them at a community college. It's fine. The only thing you wouldn't do, I mean, you can't do it anyway, they're not offered at community colleges, is you wouldn't want to take all of your science classes at a CC. You're going to end up taking upper div science courses, and that would be done at a 4-year. If you were looking for some other courses to take that would just, boost your GPA, or just finish you out, if you're looking for a DIY postbac, or you're looking for some extra classes, these are courses I would encourage you to take. Everyone needs a year of English, so advanced composition is just going to give you more writing skills, which can't hurt you when it comes to secondary writing. Public speaking is one of the core competencies. Critical reasoning, I think, couldn't hurt you for the MCAT, same with research methods. Bioethics is going to be great for interview prep. And then anatomy, cell bio, immunology, and micro are just good classes to help prepare you for med school. And then for letters, it does vary by school. Every school has their own set of letter requirements. Most commonly, though, I would say most schools across the board are going to require 2 science letters, a non-science letter. Some might say a non-academic letter, and then especially for DOs, they usually recommend a physician letter. Most of them now are saying MD or DO. A handful are still out there saying DO only. I haven't come across a ton of allopathic med schools that require a physician letter, although it's not unheard of. But if you have 2 science letters and then, a combination of other letters, you should be fine. Most people, excuse me, most people have around 5 letters. The biggest difference between AMCAS and ACOMAS with letters is that for AMCAS, you can pick and choose which letters go to which school. So you don't have to designate, you don't have to give every school every letter. However, in ACOMAS, every letter goes to every school. And then for centralized apps, the big thing I want you to know is that you have to send transcripts from every school when you open up your application in May. You can't pick and choose which transcripts go there. And some people assume that because their transfer credits are on their main transcript that they don't need to send it from the other schools. That's not correct, and that will hold up your verification. Every single class you've ever taken at the college level goes into your GPA in AMCAS, so every single transcript has to be sent. This is a rough timeline that we like to follow. If we're starting in January, which I would highly encourage, we're going to start drafting your personal statement. By February, we'll move into your experience writing. By March, you're going to have contacted your letter writers and finishing your personal statement and experience writing during that time. Hopefully we have everything done by April so you can open up your app in May, send your transcripts, get your letter writers added, work on everything during May, and then you can submit early in June if you'd like. Sometimes that works out great, and sometimes people don't get it all done, and that's okay. If you can submit it within the month of June, I think you're still in good shape. You don't have to have your school list done by the time you submit. You can submit with just one school on your list and then continue researching schools. Of course, if you get it done, that's great. Then you can add your schools. I also encourage you to not add all of your schools at the same time. Not like if you're applying to 30 schools, don't add all 30 schools into AMCAS when you submit. You don't need to do that. Sometimes not sometimes, I often encourage people to add schools in waves. I find that it manages people's mental health a lot better because when you add all 30 schools in, that means you're going to get about 25 emails the first week of July. And while that sounds amazing, you might be thinking, oh, I'd love to get 25 emails from schools on the first week and have 25 secondaries to do. That's actually really overwhelming. And I find that it has in the past caused people a great deal of stress, and it doesn't create the productivity level that you might expect. But when I have done this with people and had them do it in batches of 10, they've actually been able to move much faster through the process because when they get 10 secondaries, or some usually comes, about 6 or 7 at a time, they're much more manageable. It's less overwhelming. So when you get 6 secondaries, you don't feel that same degree of stress. You feel more invigorated. You're like, yes, I can do 6 secondaries. You get them done faster, and then you feel that accomplishment and you're more motivated. So you get those done really fast, and you add 10 more, and you get 6 more secondaries, and you get those done. And then the other ones will kind of trickle in throughout the process. But when people tend to feel motivated when they accomplish things. So creating that situation from the beginning so that you don't get overwhelmed easily and early is generally more helpful. And so we'll do secondaries all the way through July and August, and then hopefully everything's done by September so you can start the waiting game for interviews. So I hope I gave you the secret to getting in. I gave you some tips. Certainly don't claim to have the secrets or the answers or anything like that. There's a million and a half strategies I give people throughout the process. I couldn't possibly say everything in a 20-minute presentation, but if you have any questions, please reach out. I'm happy to help you in any way that I can. Have a great day.